tell us, do you regard this as a victory, both for you personally, but also more broadly for the country?
Yeah, for the country, well, I'd say both. I'd say both because there's a lot of pressure out there to do something that was not in the best interest of our country. Now, let's keep in mind, supposedly, each country is making a contribution to some kind of an agreement in Paris. The contribution that Obama made on behalf of this country was that we would reduce emissions by 27% by 2025. Well, the problem with that is two problems. First of all, it can't be done. According to his own EPA, it was impossible. We could not, there's no way that we could have accomplished that. And secondly, other countries don't know this, David, but in our form of government, it's not just a president. We've got a Congress, and Congress has to agree to this type of a thing. Well, President Obama tried for 8 years to get Congress to agree, and they laughed at him. It wasn't even close. He didn't get half the votes that he wanted. So it's kind of interesting. They're all crying right now and demagoguing this thing. In fact, they had the opportunity to do it. Obama had the House and the Senate, and they had the White House, and he didn't do it and couldn't do it. So that's where we are today. Now, the other countries, if you look at China, for example, they're laughing at us too because their commitment is that they will increase their emissions for another 13 years. Then they'll talk about reducing their CO2 emissions. They're actually, and a lot of people are not aware of this, they're cranking out an additional power plan each 10 days. So, and then you have countries like India. They say, fine, our contribution is we'll take $2.5 trillion, right. Then we'll sign on and we'll do something. Well, that's, right. You know.
Right. So,
that would constitute the largest single tax increase in the history of this country.
Well, Senator, as you know, the president yesterday said it was unfair, that this wasn't fairly shared. But my question for you, sir, is would you be in favor of an international agreement that was fair to the United States, that did have us reduce emissions to some degree, let's assume a degree that you would think was feasible? Would you be in favor of that if they could come up with that agreement?
Well, see, that, yeah, if they could, but that's a big if. In fact, they've tried to do this year after year after year, and they've not been able to do it. It always ends up a huge burden for the United States of America. And by the way, somebody on your program just a minute ago, because I was listening to it, said that we have reduced dramatically our CO2 emissions in this country, while other countries have not done that. So I'd say we are doing it, and so we are taking care of the problem as best we can here. What? By the way, we have to admit that if we did something in this country, it's not going to have an effect on emissions worldwide. I mean, everybody knows that.
But is it worth pursuing the goal, however difficult it is it worth pursuing a goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions around the globe?
Well, we're doing that anyway, and when you look at the countries where the real problems are, it would be China and India, and they are increasing, not decreasing. And so, you know, if everybody, and by the way, I've gone to a couple of these December United Nations parties that they've had for 21 years, and when I talk to people from countries in Africa and elsewhere, they say, no, we don't care about this, but this is where the money is. All these people, the 192 of them, most of them are coming thinking they're going to get some large block of money out of this thing. And consequently, the Green Fund, you know, our president, Obama, was making great big contributions to the Green Fund, but they were all coming from the United States. Other people were not not participating.
Yeah, so finally, Senator, we have this IB system. It's an instant Bloomberg where users of the terminal get to write in things. We have a question actually from a viewer right now. Basically,
Sure.
Is asking, quite apart from whether the quotas are fair, this is a voluntary agreement after all. Do you have a problem with compliance? Do you doubt China's compliance with what they've voluntarily agreed to?
Well, what they've agreed to is increasing their EPA. So yes, I agree with that.
You think they will comply with what they committed to?
Well, no, they're increasing their emissions. That's what China is doing. They're saying we're going to continue to increase for 13 years. Then we'll talk about, they didn't make a commitment, we'll talk about reducing. Now, that's a totally different thing than, so you can't answer the question because it's assuming that they've made a commitment that they have not made.